Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Jim Sluss. I'm the interim president here at OU-Tulsa, and I'm happy to welcome you to the OU-Tulsa campus. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, so really glad that you made time to join us for this most recent installment of the Presidential Research Series, a quarterly series of lectures that we have that are focused on research and innovation. And we've decided that this year, for the remainder of 2023, we're going to be focusing on our new OU Polytechnic Institute that was created last year, and it's focused on awarding advanced and applied technology degrees here at OU-Tulsa. Cybersecurity will be the first of those degrees that we roll out, and so that's the reason for the topic of the panel today. But I would like to introduce to you someone very special, and it's our inaugural director of the OU Polytech Institute, Dr. Terry Reed. She's here with us. Dr. Reed does not officially start until tomorrow, but we're very happy that she made it into town in time to join us for this panel discussion today. So if you get a chance to say hello to her and welcome her to Tulsa afterwards, that would be great. It's next my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Conor Godfrey, who will be our moderator for the panel today. And Conor is the director of cybersecurity at the Tulsa Innovation Labs. He brings more than 10 years of experience in his role, and in that role brings together diverse groups to look at issues around cybersecurity and national security. We're really pleased that he agreed to moderate the panel today. And at the Tulsa Innovation Labs, he's got a pretty broad, large portfolio of initiatives designed to create a world-class cybersecurity and analytics ecosystem here in Tulsa. So we're very fortunate to have such an asset in Tulsa and Northeast Oklahoma. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Conor Godfrey to kick off this panel discussion.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. I would be remiss not to thank Terry. Welcome. I hope you're billing for today, by the way. I'm thrilled to kind of moderate this panel. We have a wealth of expertise, and very shortly I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves. But I actually want to chat with the audience for 1 minute. So could you raise your hand if you are an OU faculty member today? Maybe 20%, 25. How about an OU how about a student of any stripe? Great. Lifelong student. Fantastic. How about a cyber practitioner? All right, and then we'll do a kind of cyber curious other bucket. That's great. Okay, so that's that's most of our audience. I feel like for panelists, why don't we keep that in mind as we think about this? So, by way of introduction, I'll ask each panelist to do the name, rank, and serial number. Maybe a minute on your background and your current role, just so we can understand where your perspective is coming from. And for fun, maybe one piece of technology that you are excited about at the moment. Could be in your home life, it could be in childcare, it could be in your job, but just one piece of technology that has been on your mind. I'll take the mic to give you 1 minute to think about it. How about that? So again, Conor Godfrey, I direct the cybersecurity portfolio at Tulsa Innovation Labs. So Tulsa Innovation Labs is the economic growth arm of the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And without drowning you in detail, we believe that Tulsa has a specific set of comparative advantages, and we should be investing our resources as a city, as a state in Tulsa, as a foundation in those comparative advantages. We're not big enough to win in everything, but we are certainly powerful enough to win in a few sectors and subsectors. So Tulsa Innovation Labs invests in cyber and data, in advanced mobility, in energy technology, and in digital health. And so there's one of me in each one of those sectors. My background is almost all in national security, so spent kind of 10 to 12 years abroad, mostly in West and North Africa, some on the pointy end of the spear, some in terms of kind of diplomatic integration with our armed forces, managed a few cyber programs towards the end of that career, but moved to Tulsa 2 years ago. My wife's from Bartlesville, and have not looked back since. Honestly, it's been quite a journey. In terms of technology, we're going to talk a lot about cyber, so I'm going to stay away from cyber. I am excited about AI-powered scheduling. I don't know if any of you are experimenting with AI scheduling, but I probably spend 30% of my time simply getting meetings together, which is an embarrassing amount. So I can't bring on the kind of robot schedulers fast enough. But with that, why don't I turn it over to the panel? Jim, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure. So again, I'm Jim Sluss, and I'm the interim president here at OU-Tulsa. I'm also, by training, an electrical engineer and a faculty member in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I have been engaged in the planning for this OU Polytechnic Institute for over a year now. So I'm really excited to see it coming into fruition. Really excited to welcome my longtime good friend, Dr. Terry Reed, as the inaugural director for this program. I think it's going to be great for Tulsa and great for Northeast Oklahoma, and I look forward to all of the industry partnerships and government partnerships that we can forge working together to address workforce demand. So I guess favorite relatively new technology is the facial recognition software that allows me to sign in to all of my accounts hands-free.
It's a good one. Hey, Shawn.
I'm Shawn Whitcomb. I'm currently serving as the Chief Information Security Officer for Cherokee Nation Business. I came to Tulsa about 6 months ago, so I'm fairly new to the Tulsa area. Came from Kansas City. I've been serving as the Chief Technology Officer for Cherokee Federal for the last 2 years until I took the position as Chief Information Security Officer. So I wouldn't say I'm super familiar with Tulsa, more familiar with the Kansas City area. If you have any questions about Kansas City, I'm happy to answer those. But Tulsa, I'm learning more and more every day, out meeting with the folks in the Tulsa area and also through my work. So just by way of background, I have a very broad background. I've been a COO, I've been a CTO, CIO for over 30 years. Also been a CISO prior to serving for the Cherokee Nation. I was a CISO for a global law firm based out of London. And I was out in London, stationed in London right before the pandemic. So I had to come back because of the pandemic. Otherwise, I'd probably still be in London. It's very difficult, as you can imagine, doing global cybersecurity. And I don't know how many of you know much about Cherokee Nation, but we do service over 20 different countries. We're not just based here in Oklahoma, and that's really on our federal side. So we just here recently positioned over 300 people in Japan. So it's not just a onesie twosie thing. We do have a strong presence in internationally. And so it does make cybersecurity very challenging. Again, from a personal perspective, what really interests me is I'm going to go really broad here. I'm going to say where artificial intelligence is going. And I would say that's both in the home as well as out of the home. And if anybody hasn't heard the latest about Chat GPT, I'm sure that'll be a topic that comes up here a couple times. So anyway, I think that's it. I'll pass it on.
So my name is Kris. I'm actually filling in for Joan Stanolis, who has laryngitis today. So you get a little bit of a downgraded version today. But I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Critical Fault, a cyber risk assessment firm based out of Oklahoma City. And Joan is the Chief Operating Officer as well. In short, we are pen testers, which is a fancy term for saying we're ethical hackers, meaning we breach people's systems, networks, wireless, buildings, you name it. And the only thing that makes us ethical is we ask for permission first before we do so. It's very important you do that. But we do sit on the board of InfraGard for InfraGard Oklahoma. There's a lot going on. Yes, the same InfraGard that got breached about 4 or 5 months ago. So that InfraGard. And it's been very important for me to be a part of the community here. I'm a lifelong native of Oklahoma. I've been offered many opportunities to lead the state for many different jobs and schooling opportunities, and I decided to stay here. My wife has been a public school teacher for many years, and this will be her last year in public school teaching. Oh, and we're also members of the Oklahoma Innovative Technology Alliance, so OITA, which is a great organization for those who aren't familiar with that. A little bit about fun things with me. Yeah, there's ChatGPT, and I'm like we mentioned before, that's going to be a good part of the conversation today. But lately, I've been getting into old technology. My brother is special needs. He has a great interest in old tech, like we're talking about 80s and 90s tech. And the cool thing about this is that there's a lot of vulnerabilities that still exist today, such as USB drivers or old peripheral card configurations that can be taken advantage of. And you throw ChatGPT in there to understand that and make sense of this, you can do some truly wicked things. So I'll hand it over to you.
So my name is Mark Raymond. I'm a professor at OU in Norman. I'm a faculty member in the College of International Studies. That might seem weird. Why am I here? I am a political scientist by training. I study international relations. And for about the last decade or more, I've been studying that mainly in empirical applications to cybersecurity policy. So the UN, for example, has been negotiating about military uses of information technology since 1998, which is within 1 to 2 years of the advent of what we call the commercialized internet. Right? So almost from the very outset, there have been recognized international security implications of digital technologies and information technology broadly. That's kind of what I study. I've also written about how private actors, companies, civil society groups, all kinds of different organizations, bodies of engineers, effectively make policy decisions for cybersecurity. We usually think of policy as sort of a government thing. In this area, in this issue, that's not always true. There's a really interesting and complex mix of stakeholders, not all of which are in national capitals, some of which are in places like Tulsa, or can be and should be arguably in places like Tulsa. And so for me, even though my work is in many ways global, the other really interesting and important thing to know about internet technologies is they are simultaneously global and local, right? You can have an effect using these technologies, using network computing entirely around the planet. That is a really important property that complicates our usual ways of thinking about policy, where we think, oh, well, if I have a state or local issue, I know where to go for that. I go to City Hall, I go to the state capitol, I go to my national capital. Yes, for sure. But it might also mean going to the private sector firm that owns the infrastructure that you're dealing with. Or it might mean dealing with a government in another country where the threat actor that's causing the issues is based and located. That can have huge jurisdictional implications. So I'm not going to talk about a technology. I'm going to talk instead about a policy decision that was made this morning by the federal government, which issued an executive order. That executive order imposed stronger sort of requirements on cloud computing providers to do what's called know your customer. This is a very familiar phrase from the financial industry, where it's sort of used to sort of prevent money laundering and terrorist activity through banks. Well, in the same way, it's sort of a known problem that cloud infrastructure, much of which is in the United States or owned by American firms, is being rented and used for cyber attacks. And this augments the capacity of threat actors to do bad things. This know your customer requirement tells Amazon, tells Microsoft, tells other major cloud service providers, you can't just take anybody's business. You have to make sure you know who that customer is, why they want that cloud capacity, what they're using it for, and how to contact them if there's an issue. That is a way in which policy can meaningfully affect lived cybersecurity for individuals, for firms, for governments, for all of us as a society. And so for me, when I think about technology, I think of it in a way that includes policy decisions as part of technology, a tool built and used for a purpose. So I hope we can have a broad discussion about cybersecurity today that includes those kinds of dimensions too. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Brian Overman. I'm the AVP of Security Operations at American Fidelity based in Oklahoma City. My team really tries to look at what Chad and his team does with or without permission and see if we can identify or detect and defend those things. So traditionally, if you've ever heard of the blue team, red team, my team is primarily a blue team perspective. We also do identity and a couple other things. I've been with American Fidelity a little over 7 years, have a broad experience from governance and policy into the technical world with cybersecurity as a whole. For me, two pieces real quick of technology. One I'm actually playing with today. It's a Remarkable 2.0. I love to take handwritten notes. And so being able to do that without having to use and reuse notepads. So super excited about that. I am curious about ChatGPT. I won't say I'm excited about it because I think there's still some dangers and concerns around AI and ChatGPT. So I'm curious about that. But from a role perspective, we're starting to see a lot of good inroads with things. For those of you that are cyber professionals, breach attack simulation or attack surface management, and what can we do? How do we begin to then continue to breach that proactive? I continue to try to coach my team. How do we be proactive? Typically blue teams are very responsive, right? An incident's happened and we're responding to it, or we're trying to then build counter defenses for it. How do we get out in front of that? How do we test our controls prior to the bad guys actually getting a chance to test our controls? How do we test them and validate that our alerts, that our controls are actually working in place before the bad guys get a chance to actually expose them?
Great. Panel, thank you very much. Mark, you even defeated the introductory prompt and taught us a lesson at the same time. So extra kudos to you. So let me roadmap our conversation a little bit. I want to spend the first third talking about national or global trends in cybersecurity. We have private sector perspectives, we have academic perspectives, we have government contracting from a tribal nation. So I think we have enough to kind of cover a lot of the waterfront in terms of what does the industry look like and what will it look like. I want to transition to why Tulsa. Why do those trends matter to Tulsa? What components of those trends do or don't matter to Tulsa? What are our comparative advantages that we should be building on? And then we'll end with what do we need to do to actually take advantage of those opportunities? What role can OU Polytechnic play? How can we be preparing our students to kind of jump on those opportunities as they present themselves? So let's start kind of at 40,000 feet. And maybe what I'll do is I'll kick it to our private sector contingent first, and then maybe Shawn to you, and we'll finish with an academic perspective on this one. But talk to me about the kind of mega trends in cyber right now, and use your lens. Don't feel like you need to cover the waterfront, from talent to everything else. We have a few other folks who can do that. So maybe, I don't know, Kris or Brian, one of you kick it off.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest things that I'm continuing to see, we've heard it for several years, whether you want to call it shadow IT or citizenship IT, that ability from a technology perspective, there's not a company today that isn't a technology focused company of some sort, right? Whether you see, to use a very rudimentary example, you see McDonald's now putting in self-order kiosk and things of that nature to insurance companies. And how can we do these things? How can we leverage our end users to be more technology centric? All of that plays into a role from a cyber piece. Everybody now has a role from at the cyber table, and understanding from a security perspective that they have a job or responsibility that includes that. And so to me, that's one of the biggest trends is how do we continue to educate? How do we continue to get people to recognize that, hey, if I'm using ChatGPT, or if I'm trying to use UiPaths or robotic automation, RPA and things of that nature, that, hey, maybe I need to do a code review. Maybe we need to make sure that we're not passing sensitive information to the cloud, and making sure that, hey, I understand what responsibility I have. The other piece that we continue to see to get to the policy side, or to the regulatory side, is that we're continuing to see the increase from a regulatory perspective. What are we doing to protect consumer data, right? If I have the right to forget, or if I have the right to be forgotten, how do we then put it in the right security controls to provide the confidence to our customers that, hey, we've taken that away, or that ability to protect your data. We're not selling your data to a third party. We're not doing those things. GDPR started with that. California protection, the California Consumer Protection Act has really facilitated that here in the States. But those to me are some of the bigger trends. I know policy and regulation isn't necessarily a big technical piece, but that's continuing to grow, and being able to demonstrate that ability has become a huge concern.
I really like the point on the digital transformation of almost every sector of the economy. And the only reason I pull this theme out here is I think one theme that will be woven throughout this panel is, what is a cyber professional, right? I think many of us are used to thinking about a cyber professional graduating from Stanford and working at a cyber firm or going to work for the NSA. McDonald's needs cyber professionals right now, right? Like every sector of the economy needs more cyber, more data, and they're not all engineering roles, but we can get to that in the education piece. Ryan, I appreciate that. Kris, anything to add?
Actually, quite a bit. So to add on to what he was talking about earlier, is with so much automation occurring all over the place. What we do as red teamers, and we work in the community, we work with hackers, we work with those that are operating on the dark web. And what we're seeing is that there's more and more efforts to abuse all of this automation. That's the point. We're taking advantage of systems that don't know right from wrong. They just do what they're designed to do unless we find a way around that. So you take all this automation, you add in the ability to transfer money anywhere using different crypto coins, such as Bitcoin, and then you add in the explosion, the absolute explosion, in the number of available exploits that are available today that you can find just with simple Google searches. You can find available exploits. Oftentimes they get classified and they get what we call a CVE number. And the number of CVEs that come out every single year continues to grow. When you add in rampant automation, the ability to transfer money anywhere, and the number of exploits available, this is how we get ransomware. This is how so much of these attacks are available. That's really what people are trying to do. They're still the goal is still to try to make money, or to try to cause, whether you're a hacktivist, that may be a goal, or you're trying to steal money from other people. But all the tools are there, and much of this ransomware is even now considered ransomware as a service. I don't have to write my own ransomware code. I can go and hop on some of the dark web forums and go get ransomware as a service and target your firm. And if I find a breach a way in, I can hit you guys with that. The good news is that policy is catching up, but slowly. That for a long time, we went with laws written in the 80s, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That's what was really governing what people could or couldn't do. And finally, these policies are catching up. I'm glad to hear that the know your customer is coming, because oftentimes we use the cloud. That is a very common technique by attackers, is to use the cloud to spin up attack systems and to target systems directly. And then we spin it right back down and we disappear. We're off the face of the planet. Nobody knows that we were really there. Know your customer helps defeat that particular issue.
Kris, if you could distill some of those changes into an answer to this, why is someone in the audience today more vulnerable than they would have been 5 years ago? If you had to kind of put your finger on it, what makes someone more vulnerable today?
So your digital footprint is probably the biggest piece here. There's a lot of different services that people spin up that you may use a product for a day, you may use it for a month, you may cancel that service, but your data still exists there. Your information is still out and about. So when we're talking about the individual specifically, that this information leaves a trail. And that trail, we specifically will try to find that trail and to hone in on it. A common piece that we do is with social media, if we're going to attack an organization and we want to clone and make realistic cloned badges of that organization, I'm going to go to social media and I'm going to find images of your badge and I'm going to recreate them as best as I possibly can. The digital footprint and the over-reliance on automation is really the keys that we use to be able to target specific organizations, specific people, and do what we do.
No, I like that. And I think the only piece from your original answer I'd pull back out for that is that I think the costs of mounting an attack are falling towards zero. And so it used to not be worth it to go after random member of our audience, right? Because you would have had to go find new information, develop new tools, et cetera. But using these tools, if the cost to attack you is essentially free. Why not, right? Fantastic. So thank you, private sector team. Let's maybe Shawn, if you wouldn't mind, just giving, you said in, I think, a truly unique spot, right? Working for a sovereign nation on their security footprint with federal customers. So what are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah, so I wrote down 3 of them here and I'll rattle them off, not in any specific order. So from a tribal nation / running businesses. So just to be clear, I'm on the business side. So Cherokee Nation Business does multi-billion-dollar organization. So it's quite large in what it does. And again, like I said, it has a footprint across the globe. One of the challenges that I think we're seeing, and I think others are seeing probably in the room and elsewhere, is we said know your customer. I would say know your vendor. So one of the biggest problems that we face as an organization, and many organizations are facing, is their vendors aren't protected. They don't have the same resiliency in cybersecurity. They don't have, I mean, forget a CISO. They don't have a security presence at all in their organization to train their users on how to do things right. Or even, the alert mechanisms that if someone goes in and changes their MX record, so now all the emails you send to them are now being routed to a bad actor. And that bad actor is actually getting all your emails and then routing them back out. That type of third party, not knowing your third parties and requiring them to have some sense of cyber resiliency is super vulnerable to you. You have, people will talk about APIs, and you don't have to know what an API is. Just know that there is a digital connection potentially to a third party. All your digital connections, you should be asking all the right questions. At Cherokee, we have a questionnaire we send out to all of our vendors. All the vendors get this questionnaire. It all comes back. We don't connect anybody until they actually fill out the questionnaire. We vet the questionnaire. And then if they're hooking to critical systems, we'll do that on an annual basis. Now, that's just one step. That doesn't stop them from falsifying the questionnaire or anything like that. So just be really mindful of who you're connecting with. I mean, one of the things you should do is definitely do a search to see if they have had any instance related to cybersecurity. So that's one. The other one that is really big for us is we're a very diverse population for workforce. So I'm going to say work from home, and everyone knows what that is. But work from home is is also very vulnerable to us. We don't know the environment they're sitting in. We have no idea who their internet provider is. They can VPN in or they cannot VPN in. But when they do VPN in, what's the level of scrutiny we're giving each and every one of those laptops that are ours? But again, we don't know what they've done with them while they were offline. So we don't know who's in the room with them, things of that nature, or who else is on their private network at home. So that's another area that I think is of high concern. The last one that I wrote down here is, and this is a little bit into the the regulations and the policymakers. We're seeing a lot more pressure on data. So since and I think you had mentioned this, your digital footprint is becoming so large, someone has to regulate the data and say, for this specific data, you have to have this level of security. So one of our high level securities, we have a couple of them, but one is PCI. Everyone knows what PCI is. So your credit card data is safe with us because we have extra security around it. The other one is all of our federal contracts have what's called CUI data. And that CUI data has another step or regulation that requires us to treat it differently. So if you're getting into cybersecurity, if you're in cybersecurity, you're probably already feeling the pressure around data and how you're treating data. Data treatment is very important from a cybersecurity standpoint. So.
Thank you for that. I'll try to do a quick wrap up at the end, but just briefly, and then to our academics on the panel, I promise I'll give you more air time in the next question. changing trends in how academia is preparing students for the world that we just heard described, or other trends in academia as it relates to cyber from your perspective. Maybe Mark, we can start with you and then Jim finish with you.
Yeah, okay. So I think we've probably scared a lot of folks in the audience, hopefully a little bit. I'm going to try and make it worse. The big global trend is great power competition. This is something for me, when I'm thinking about threat actors, as important as sort of, garden variety financial cybercrime, as challenging as that could be, those actors are generally much less capable than determined governments, right? Governments employ large numbers of people. They don't need to worry about violating their own domestic law. If the government decides to do something as an act of policy that's legal in the country, they have to worry about the international ramifications of it, possibly. But one of the complicating factors about cybersecurity is that attribution is not impossible, but it's difficult and it takes a lot of time and effort. So it might be months between discovering the attack and actually having some degree of confidence about who is responsible for it. You're dealing with a sophisticated actor. And so in that context, and in the context of the war in Ukraine, in the context of deteriorating relations between the US and China, we have to understand that for a lot of the core systems and the critical systems that we depend on for national security, but that we also depend on for everyday life, like power grids, water systems, systems of that nature, we face potential threats. A lot of those are probably just espionage. A lot of them are probably just exploratory attempts to get into the network, take a look around and see what we can see. It might be reconnaissance, it might be intelligence gathering, but it might also be something that militaries would call preparing the battlefield. One of the difficulties about using cyber technologies for directly military purposes is that it's actually nowhere near as fast or easy as launching a cruise missile or launching some kind of military strike. You have to prepare ahead of time. You have to have an access point into that system. You have to have a malware payload or other means of attack that's developed and ready to go that you have confidence will have the effect that you intend it to have, and not, for example, a much bigger effect than you intended to have. That's a major problem. You can't assume with any degree of confidence exactly how your malware payload is going to react inside the adversary system, because they might be running some other piece of code that you didn't know about your malware effects in a way that you don't understand. And so those complexities in this sort of broader political context of conflict between the US and Russia, the US and China, that's an extra layer of the threat and the trend. And it affects not only governments, not only even state or local governments, but it affects private sector firms that are very often vendors to governments and are exploited as means of attack into those government systems. Very often, as Shawn said, because they're not actually as secure as they need to be. And so this ecosystem is fundamentally interwoven. And it's all tied up in a world where we face this serious threat of great power competition and even conflict.
Jim, would you like to add on anything there from a kind of academic administration perspective?
Sure, I'll just be brief and say that the first program that we're rolling out, a Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity, recognizes this great power security issue that Mark rightfully brings up. And while we've designed the curriculum to have a strong technical core, as you would expect in a traditional cybersecurity program, we've also broadened the available electives that students can take so that they can pivot to a more national and global security perspective if that's something that they're interested in. They can still be very techie if they want to pick their electives that way, or they can have this policy focus as well. And so we think that that will be an advantage as we produce graduates that are workforce ready across the cybersecurity profession.
I couldn't agree more. I think not just policy ready, but when you think of interdisciplinary, from industrial psychology, right? Talking about human factors, or even industry expertise that OU has, such as in health technology, right? A highly vulnerable industry. So I think you're thinking about that the right way. So we probably have, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes left before I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So I'm going to ask, let's say, two members of the panel to address the why Tulsa component of this. when I say Tulsa, yes, I mean the city, but feel free to, think big tent, right? If you need Oklahoma or maybe the 412 corridor over to JB Hunt and Walmart, right? So think about this however you need to make the most compelling answer. But how does Tulsa intersect with many of the trends that we just outlined? Is there anyone that wants to take a stab at that first?
I'm new to Tulsa, so I should probably take a stab at that.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm sort of kidding.
Please.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm again new to Tulsa, so I will tell you that I came here because I've done a lot of research on Tulsa. And specifically related to cybersecurity, right? So Tulsa has cybersecurity doesn't really have a home today. If you look across the United States, you may find a home in a couple areas, Minnesota being one of them, maybe down in Texas. But I would tell you that it doesn't yet have a home. And I looked at the amount of education that's available in Tulsa, Oklahoma area, specifically in Tulsa. And one of the things about cybersecurity is you need to educate and train up a population base. And Tulsa definitely seems like it's pivoted and turned in the right direction to really educate the population to really generate a group of individuals that are cybersecurity ready. I would also say that we have also found that there's a brand new SOC, Security Operations Center, that's being stood up in downtown Tulsa that will also be very important as Tulsa becomes kind of that home, hopefully that home base for cybersecurity. And the company that's doing that and has done that, I should say, is Conquest Cyber. So it's a company you may or may not have heard of. If you haven't heard of them, you might want to look them up because obviously they're hiring for their Security Operations Center. But it's also, they believed enough in Tulsa to land. They could have picked anywhere in the United States, by the way. So they specifically picked Tulsa to land their Security Operations Center. So
I think that's perfect. Anyone else? I might add a few things here, but anything from the panel in terms of, why here, why now, if you will?
I'm happy to jump in here.
Great.
I've been in the cybersecurity industry for almost 20 years now. And when I was going through school, my options were somewhat limited, although we do have several cybersecurity schools and Center for Academic Excellence schools here in the state of Oklahoma. The big main school that we were ushered towards at least 10 years ago was OSU IT, based out of Okmulgee. Okmulgee there is fairly close to Tulsa. It does have the ability to generate a lot of decent graduates and has for several years. I did work for an organization here in Tulsa that was providing cybersecurity services. So it just really seemed that a lot of these efforts did circle around Tulsa. I'm really glad to see that the bachelor's in cybersecurity is coming online here in Tulsa with OU. You also here in Tulsa have the George Kaiser Foundation, who seems very interested in helping the efforts in cybersecurity, as well as the Tulsa Innovation Labs, keeping that effort going. As somebody from Oklahoma City, there's so many things going on here in Tulsa. It kind of makes me a little envious and wish maybe I'd lived here. So, is that $10,000 thing still available?
Do you want a final word on?
Yeah, I was just going to answer why Tulsa,
Sure, please.
and give a shameless plug for Tulsa Innovation Labs.
Well, better coming from you than from me.
Because when we were looking at the landscape of degrees that the Polytechnic Institute could offer, I feel like you had already done a lot of the work for us, not just in cybersecurity, but in identifying data science, the advanced mobility across the 412 corridor, the virtual health, which is, I think, a natural cybersecurity play. Also, we have a school of medical informatics and it's just kind of a natural to combine medical informatics, cybersecurity to address some of the issues, let's just say around HIPAA for virtual health. So
agreed entirely, and thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate the thoughts. I guess I would wrap this all into a bow in the following ways. So Tulsa has, every single city in America is competing for cyber talent, right? We are producing on a per capita basis more than the average mid-sized city, right? So we have an edge in kind of producing more cyber. Now that does not mean we're meeting our needs, right? So I think there are 600 open cyber roles in Tulsa right now. If you were to kind of go on LinkedIn, and I could probably send that around, many more nationally. So we're not meeting our needs, but this is a real comparative advantage. And Tulsa and OU Polytechnic is adding to that advantage. And I'm all about compounding advantages, right? That's the name of the game. On a more meta level, we have a dense network of critical infrastructure providers in Tulsa, right? So the headlines write themselves. Midstream energy, major target of cyber attacks. Aerospace and mobility, major target of cyber attacks, right? So we have the large firms that dominate major sectors of the economy. And it's, don't expect the Fort Meade and the NSA to protect our backyard. We have to protect our backyard, right? And so as our companies grow, our cyber workforce needs to grow. We're very well positioned to be the cyber provider for these critical industries. And as a final point, if you look at our two core industries in this region, energy and mobility, right? Either aerospace here in Oklahoma, but also kind of more future mobility in Northwest Arkansas. There are no two industries in the country that will be undergoing a bigger transformation in the next decade than energy and mobility. That's going to create an entirely new attack surface. Think about, anything from charging stations to connected cars, right? Even the intersection, if you will, of mobility and energy is a new attack surface. So I think Tulsa is incredibly well positioned to be the cyber provider for that nexus. Now, let's do this in 5 minutes because I think the questions may be in this vein too. But if I could turn perhaps Mark to you first. Actually, Mark, I'm going to switch up the order. If I could have either Brian or Kris tell me, who are you hiring right now? So you have no idea what the cyber threat, ransomware today, API security, who knows what it's going to be in 5 years? How are you thinking about hiring? Give me the kind of archetypal profile that you're looking for. Maybe just a quick hit on both you, Brian, and then Kris. Or Kris, if you're ready, please.
Sure. So we're looking for the forever learner. Somebody who's not afraid to continue learning. There is a severe shortage in cybersecurity professionals, and usually organizations like ourselves will be fighting for the seniors and the mid-levels. No, our industry is fighting for the juniors, the people coming right out of college. But we are looking for that hunger, that drive. These are the people that need to stay. It's a cat and mouse game, and you need to be willing to play the game if you want to be in cybersecurity.
I would echo exactly what Kris said. It is that pursuit of learning, pursuit of knowledge, the continued learner, whether you're, again, it's whether you're the junior level, the intermediate level, what's your passion, what's your hunger to continue to kind of learn and foster that. Because, this is always a cat and mouse thing. One of the things we're working on is cyber resiliency. Is we've gotten better with our controls of how we protect against certain things. The bad actors pivot and change, and if we're not continuing to learn to do that. So when I'm looking for somebody, I'm asking those questions. How much are you working to learn? What are the things that you are hungry for? And we can reskill. I can skill, and teach the things that we need you to learn from a basics or from a fundamentals perspective, but you have to be willing to kind of take that opportunity to learn and embrace it. And it's nonstop.
I think that's right on. And so maybe Mark, I'll transition to you as you think about the next 5 years of educating cyber professionals, how do we marry that vision or that profile with how we teach students over the next 5 years?
That's a great question. So I can't speak to how you train an engineer. Right? That's not what I do in a direct sense, but I can speak to how you can take someone that might have good engineering skills, might be at the beginning of acquiring those engineering skills, and help them understand the problem in a holistic way. Because I think that's a sort of necessary piece of this equation, because it's not only are you constantly learning, it's where are you looking to learn. how do you understand the problem? Do you think of this as a ones and zeros coding problem? It certainly is that. It's not only that, it is a human behavior problem. The thing that I tell my students all the time is that humans break things, right? Humans are enormously persistent, enormously determined, and very creative. And that's the nature of this cat and mouse game. But you have to be looking not only in the technology itself, you have to be looking at the human uses of it. You have to be looking all over the place and really be very broad-minded, very open-minded, very willing to learn in a broad way. I think for me, making sure that we bring that into the classroom entails multidisciplinary learning. It entails simulations. It entails practical exercises. To do that in the best way possible, we need partners that are in various different pieces of the industry so that we can have someone come into a class from a pen testing and talk about what that is and what that means. I can talk about it. Kris doesn't. He can help them understand the day-to-day in a way that, is hard to convey briefly or with reading assignments or, the kind of standard tools we have. So bringing folks like that in, it's also bringing people like American Fidelity to talk about how their business operations work and the sort of nature of the problem from their perspective. And if we can sort of be a convener and can sort of have open doors to various different pieces of the industry, but of also society and all the different economic sectors that depend on these technologies, that's where I think we make Polytechnic Institute or something like it a really powerful force multiplier for all kinds of different needs.
Does anyone have any kind of last thoughts on this particular problem, kind of how we orient our training and education? I've got a few, but I don't want to steal anything. Please do.
One of the hallmarks of a polytechnic education is a strong connection with industry stakeholders. And I think that's so vital that we stay connected with those who hire our graduates and have them help inform our curriculum, not just from a technology standpoint, but also from a professional development standpoint, and instilling in our students that passion for lifelong learning, as well as professional skills that allow them to function as a more effective professional. We've got to have that input from our partners.
I would foot stomp that. I would just add a few points. At least part of my job is helping companies that are curious about Tulsa land here and understand what the workforce landscape look like. And in the last 6 months, I've seen more cyber companies interested in Tulsa than in the previous probably 2 years, going back to the very beginning of my time here. A lot of SOC services, but also companies who are interested in sales, right? So, people that don't underestimate soft skills. They're just as important in this engineering heavy field as they are in any other field, right? So if you're an MBA and you're looking to specialize or at least be an integrator in a cyber capacity, you're well positioned. If you are a lawyer, oh my goodness, right? I mean, the regulatory and legal side of the cyber field is immense, right? So I want more people to see themselves in a cyber field. And I don't just mean that from a pure skills and background perspective. I mean different types of people, right? The cyber job shortage is so acute that companies are far more willing to relax degree requirements. They're willing to look at different types of candidates that often, I think, we all know that companies have their own biases. They tend to hire people that look like them, that come from the same schools, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you have critical shortages that need to be filled yesterday, I'm finding that companies are a bit more creative in terms of looking in new places. And I think that's a good thing. So again, I would want to leave you with the sense that cyber is a very broad tent. So with that, why don't we take a few questions? I think we have 10 minutes. So why don't we take 3 questions at once, and then we'll throw them all to the panel. How about 1, 2, no third hand, right here, Lawrence, please.
And forgive me, I won't try to speak loud as possible.
I can repeat it, don't.
Okay. So Oklahoma Regions reports that the number of teacher colleges prep graduates fell like 25%, while over the same period,
this number of people obtaining degrees had increased. The Economic Policy Institute revealed that on average, Oklahoma teachers make 1/3 less than their college and educated counterparts. Teachers are an integral part of our system, whether they are preparing us to get ready for college, preparing us to get ready for careers. what can we actually do? What is actually happening as a trend in Oklahoma to make education a more friendly space? For my background, I was going to be on this. I was going to be on this panel, and I have I'll have finished this year with 13 years in the educational space, and I'm leaving. So what can we do to change? Because whatever we're doing right now isn't working.
Right. So we have one question on kind of the K through 12 system. How can we, whether through funding or programming, make people more technology ready? I'm inferencing a little bit in the back, please.
So my background is in engineering, and so it's going to be an engineering question. Early on in my research, I did work with the Air Force, Tinker Air Force Base, where we looked at evaluating application that come to the depot. So they buy an application, they put it in the depot, but then the problem is if it's not, consistent with the software, then it's going to bring the depot down, and then 1 hour of down is $150,000 for the Air Force Base. And so then we transitioned from that topic to why don't we build a complete network of switches and routers and computers where we can script viruses going through the network. So we're emulating that in a lab environment, in a test bed, so we can control it. And then test how you can build smarter switches at the time to figure out that there is a traffic behaving abnormally to detect it prior it's spreading. And so it was that type of topic. And they liked Tinker at the time, liked the idea, but they didn't have the infrastructure to build this network. But Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had the infrastructure. One colonel flew with me to the base, trying to convince Wright-Patterson to give away their lab and bring it back to Oklahoma. So my question is, there's a lot that you can do with an environment such as this, because you can create your own attacks. You can build the software, AI-based software that can detect these attacks. Because most of the attacks comes in hacking really from internal the organization. It's not from outside. You'll be having firewalls and you're protecting yourself and so on. And at the time when I did the research, it was 80% of the attacks coming from within, not from outside. And some companies that are very shrewd would really have a profile for every employee. Like they have a profile for you. When you go onto your company, the same thing, when Shawn said, when you're going at home, we lost that connection because now you're outside. But within home, I can describe you as a probability of you're going to access your email at the first. There is a behavior, a pattern you do in your office. And if I detect that this behavior is not representing you, then I can see that there is some intrusion in there. So why is not Kaiser Family Foundation giving the push for that to build an infrastructure that cost maybe $10, $50 million that allow hands-on infrastructure where they can teach the students and all to how to build these attacks, how to protect these attacks and defenses and so on.
Sir, I see a few VCs in the audience and they're waiting for your pitch deck. So whenever you're ready, so we can chat about that. I think we have time for one more. Is Lawrence, please. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so my general question is actually around innovation, like the gentleman behind us was, I guess, talking about. So what are the, innovation areas and technologies that you're excited about, both from a consumer level, like us in the room, and then also maybe like a business-to-business type of level? Like, what are the things on the forefront that we should all be excited about from an innovation standpoint in cyber?
Great. So we have an educational policy, state of education in Oklahoma. Are we truly readying people for the types of careers that we're talking about? We have a kind of real world, how are we simulating real world environments in a bit of a can we have testing or range capabilities that will actually prepare people? And then finally, areas of innovation within cyber that kind of frothy at the moment, or you're particularly excited about, you think should be seeing more attention or investment. So why don't we start with kind of the education piece, which I know is near and dear to everyone's heart, and I'm not sure we have an answer on this panel, but does anyone want to bite that one off? Jim, this one might fall to you.
I was going to suggest that I see some of my colleagues from the College of Education in the audience, and one of them might be better suited to address that question than me.
Maybe, is it perfect?
Okay.
Please go.
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
It's the benefit of being a teacher. You're used to you're being heard over again. So I'm Kate Raymond, so transparency. I'm the wife of Mark Raymond on the panel. But I study math education in particular and how to learn math, which clearly has an impact on the field of cybersecurity. And I think in terms of education in the state and what we need to do, we need businesses to use their voice to support colleges and education for professional educators. The reaction to an initial about a decade, 15 years ago now, decline in the number of teachers in Oklahoma was, let's make it easier to become a teacher. That's been happening for 15 years. It's not benefiting our students. We need professional teachers just like we need professional cybersecurity teachers. And we need education professionals, we need businesses to state that that's what they need in the workforce, are people who are taught by professional educators that have the psychology understanding, the understanding of legal laws that pertain to education, the understanding of child development, the understanding of learning trajectories that really will benefit students and not just applying for right. So we need businesses to get involved. And we also need to start looking at our education system, not as K-12 and higher ed, but as a continuing system. Our K-12 students will be our higher ed students in a very short amount of time. We need to work together in higher ed and K-12 and be as one continuing system for each other so that we can really educate all students to their highest capability.
I always throw this one out there. Starting pay for teachers is $36,000. I mean, but like, you have to understand, people on this panel get paid $100,000 or more. If you want somebody to teach cybersecurity, which we do have standards since 2017 that are so high they could rival some of our college level curriculum, why would I take that job if I would take over $100,000 pay cut? You have to pay professionals if you want them to be seen as professionals.
I feel like the choir's with you on this one. So maybe we could just briefly transition to kind of employer demand for kind of hands-on keyboard, actual like range testing, and what's the role of, I think, practical experience in education. Someone want to bite that one off? Maybe Mark or others?
Well, I think this is very naturally for Kris.
Great, Kris, please take us away.
So a lot of times, and there was many different ways to answer your question. One, going back up, systems going offline and having that cost to the organization, to the Air Force, and other organizations deal with this. And when we're talking about systems falling offline on their own, Netflix was dealing with this same problem, and they built a tool called Chaos Monkey that was entirely designed to shut things off randomly and to see how they would survive any kind of incident like that. But just because we're talking about the operations side, there's still the security side. And the real way to build resilience is to train by live fire. You want to have those drills. You want to know how do organizations survive that. And the big thing I've noticed is that a lot of cybersecurity professionals don't have any red team experience. They're blue teamers. That's what they do. They use their tools. They live and die by their tools. And if their tools aren't telling them what they need to know, then we need to teach them what they need to know. How red teamers are actually operating, what they're doing. And this is where cyber ranges come in. You want to talk about cyber ranges? Oh, okay. So cyber ranges, and I do believe I heard about a year ago that George Kaiser Foundation was looking to fund a cyber range. I'm not sure where the news is on that, but maybe Jim or somebody could talk about that. I do think OU was trying to get involved on that.
Yeah, we've received a down payment appropriation from the state legislature to build a cyber range at OU-Tulsa. And we've just been applying the brakes before we started until we got the Polytechnic Institute up and running. But we're ready to go with that, to build one.
And just for everyone else in the audience who may not be in this industry, a cyber range is essentially a simulated attack that you can put an IT department through, or a group of students through, where they're all sitting in front of monitors, they're playing the role of active defenders, and there's essentially a canned attack that is unleashed on this network, and they all have different roles, and there may be a scenario involved. So it's an educational experience designed to simulate an attack.
And there's a couple other opportunities that were not available that are now today. That is the Cyber Patriot program, which is also teaches kids blue team, red team skills, as well as the CCDC. I always forget that acronym, but it is a collegiate level program to teach cyber skills to kids, because you want these real world skills to know. Again, we don't want you to live by your tools. We want you to understand different ways, creative ways to protect your networks, as well as creative ways that attackers are going to use to attack those cyber networks.
Yeah, learning to live off the land, so to speak.
Well, you have to live off the land.
Right. I think for us, I think so. So I want to make sure I understand the question. So for me, when I'm looking at potential candidates, right? So we've actually had great success from an intern program and coming in and getting them that practicum experience and really kind of getting them to jump in, hands in. And our most successful interns, or even that entry level, are those who aren't afraid to ask questions. And that's one of the first things I'll tell our interns when we come in. Hey, we all are going to look busy, but the minute you stop and ask a question, we're here to help you, and we're going to do that. And oftentimes cybersecurity professionals a lot get that persona of like, we're not here to, they're the know-alls, they don't help answer questions. And that's simply not the case, right? That's not the case at all. For my team, we'll go through tabletop exercises or cyber ranges on a consistent basis. We'll do different pieces where I would love to try to do something from like a chaos monkey type perspective, but how do we do that kind of in a much more simulated and controlled environment, because my bosses don't like it when we take production down for some reason. I'm not sure that I understand why. But when we go through that, but again, that's to educate us. Hey, you no longer have this available to you. How do we go about obtaining the information that we need, or do the investigations that we need, so we're not relying on our tools, because that is critical. That is important for those pieces. And getting our interns, getting our college students, getting those people who are even interested in it. Hey, maybe I am currently an IT professional in here, and I'm looking to make a switch. How do we educate them? How do we give them that ability to lift and shift easily into our space? Those are the pieces that we have to focus on.
Why don't we finish, because we're at time, lightning round, less than 30 seconds for anyone who wants to go on areas of innovation in cyber that you're excited about, you're seeing investment in, you're seeing new products come from. Please, yeah, start us off. Anyone who wants to go, just keep it quick.
All right, so I want to be quick. Application security. That is the forefront. What do I mean by application security? I mean the same way SolarWinds got breached, which was a really big deal. I'm surprised we're not still talking about it. It was the same way Capital One got breached. It was the same way Equifax, and half of everybody in this room's information was stolen, was application security attacks. This is what we're talking about. When I say application security, I mean if you have an internet-facing website, mobile app, doesn't matter. If attackers are able to access it, breach it, and dig down deep into the core of your organization, you have no idea how much damage we can do once we get in.
I'll just tack onto that API vulnerability testing and the things that are coming out with that, and the ability to fully bake and test APIs. That's what I'm excited about.
I'm going to cheat and hack the question again. And I'm going to talk about another role that I have with the university, and another thing that the University of Oklahoma is doing that we think is exciting and that can help develop all of these efforts at the Polytechnic. So I am also the Associate Director for International Security Policy with the Oklahoma Aerospace and Defense Innovation Institute, which is a university-wide research institute. A large portion of the work is building on work with federal customers at Tinker Air Force Base and elsewhere, But my role is to broaden that out and to help faculty members from non-STEM disciplines contribute to teams and lead projects on their own in this space. It's to help think laterally and think with community partners about different ways to think about defense innovation. And that is defense not only in terms of national defense, but very much including cyber defense, including these kinds of concerns as well. So watch that space too, in addition as the Polytechnic gets up and moving. OU is, I think, making some really big and exciting investments that we hope you'll all be part of.
I'll close unless someone else has something with just, I think when you're looking for cyber innovation, look for innovation in sectors that are digitally transforming, and there is inherent and required cyber innovation alongside. And so in our region, think unmanned aerial systems. I think that's going to be a big industry for the next 10, 15 years. There's an entire subset of questions around security for unmanned systems. So I would look there, and I would look for energy transition, right? I mean, oil and gas will be with us for a long time, but there's going to be increased, electrification, shared mobility. These are trends that are transforming the country. Net metering, bidirectional charging, right? These are things that we don't have the security and worked out for. Just think, on the data side, you have a drone that's doing pipeline surveillance and methane detection, but they're flying over a sovereign tribal nation, then a city street, then a pipeline. Who's governing what they're allowed to collect, what they're allowed to do with that data, right? There's big unanswered questions in those spaces. I think there's a lot of innovation possible. We're at time, so please join me in first thanking our panelists. And then, Jim, do you have any final words?
Thank you all for being here today. I'd also like to thank Diana Barnes for helping put this panel together today. And I'd like to thank the OU-Tulsa Marketing and Communications team for having this event come off so successfully. So be sure that you grab your OU Polytechnic Institute webcam cover on the way out. And be sure and look for upcoming events in this Presidential Research Series, and continue looking for news coming out on the OU Polytechnic Institute. We've got your name and email address now, so we'll be sure that we stay in touch with you.